back, and I don't know what chapter this one's called, so I'm just gonna say this. And where to start? This is the second season, because we are on part 2, seduction. So we are on fault lines. Alright, this is a little excerpt for it. It looks like a little paragraph. We'll read to you before we go to the actual chapter that was in this book. Okay, we're gonna read chapter 7 and 8, guys, in this video. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, for more books, because once we're done, we're gonna we'll be reading Labyrinth of Evil. So yeah, we'll read this little part before we actually read because this isn't the book, this is the page before chapter 8. So if you guys want to get the book, you like it so far, you could get the book yourself if you want to own it. I recommend getting the hardcover book, because the hardcover books are better. They're better just to have. Let's read this little paragraph that is in here. The dark is generous, and it is patient. It is the dark that seeds cruelty into justice, that drips contempt into compassion, that poisons love with grains of doubt. The dark that can be patient, because the slightest drop of rain will cause those seeds to sprout. The rain will come, and the seeds will sprout, for the dark is the soil in which they grow, and it is the clouds above them, and it waits behind the stars that gives them light. The dark's patience is infinite. Eventually, even stars burn out. Alright, chapter 8, fault lines. Mace Windu hung on to the corrugated hatch grip behind the gunship's open troop bay with one hand, squinting into the wind that whipped into his overcloak behind him. His other hand shaded his eyes against the glare from one of the orbital mirrors that concentrated the capital's planet's daylight. The mirror was slowly turning aside now, allowing a band of twilight to approach the gunship's destination. That destination, a kilometer-thick landing platform in the planet's vast industrial zone, was marked with a steeply slanting tower of smoke and vapor that stretched from the planet's surface to the uppermost reaches of the atmosphere, a tower that only now was beginning to spread and coil from its tiny source point to a horizon-spanning smear across the stratospheric winds. The gunship roared over the bottomless canyons of Durasteel and Permacrete that formed the landscape of Coruscant, allowing straight for the industrial zone without regard for the rigid traffic laws that governed flight on the galactic planet until martial law was officially lifted by the Senate. The darkening skies will be traveled only by Republic military craft, Jedi transports, and emergency vehicles. Alright. The gunship qualified as all three. Mace could see the ship now, what was left of it, resting on the scorched platform far ahead. A piece of a ship, a fragment less than a third of what once had been the Trade Federation flagship, still burning despite the gouts of fire suppression, the foam raining down on it from 5 different ships, and the emergency support clone troops who surrounded it on the platform. Mace shook his head. Skywalker again, the chosen one. Who else could have brought in this Hulk? Who else could have even come close? The gunship swung into a hot landing. Repulsors howling, Mace hopped out before it could settle and gave the pilot an open palm gesture to signal him to wait. The pilot, faceless within his helmet, responded with a closed fist. Though, of course, the pilot wasn't faceless at all under his armored helmet. That clone pilot had a face that Mace Windu remembered all too well. That face would always remind him that he had once held Dooku within his grasp and had let him slip away. Across the platform, an escape pod hatch cycled open. Emergency crews scrambled within an escape slot, and a moment later, the Supreme Chancellor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker were all on deck beside the burning ship, closely followed by a somewhat battered R2 unit that lifted itself down on customized maneuvering rockets. Mace strode swiftly out to meet them. Palpatine's robes were scorched and tattered at the hem, and he seemed weak. He leaned a bit on Skywalker's shoulder as they moved away from the ship. On Skywalker's other side, Master Kenobi seemed to touch the worst for wear himself, caked with dust and leaking a trickle of blood from a scalp wound. Skywalker by contrast, looked every bit the HoloNet hero he was supposed to be. He seemed to tower over his companions, as though he had somehow gotten even taller in the last month since Mace had seen him last. His hair was tousled, his color was high, and his walk still had the grounded grace of a natural fighter. But there was something new in his physicality, in the way he moved his head, perhaps or the way the weight of Palpatine's arms on his shoulders seemed somehow to belong there, or something less definable, some new ease, new confidence, and aura of inner power, presence. Skywalker was not the same young man the Council had sent off to the Outer Rim 5 standard months ago. Chancellor, Mace said as he met them, "Are you well? Do you need medical attention?" He gestured over his shoulder at the waiting ship. "I have fully equipped field surgery." No need," Palpatine said rather faintly. "Thank you, Master Windu, but I am well, quite well, thanks to these two." Mace nodded. "Master Kenobi, Anakin." "Never better," Skywalker replied, looking as if he meant it, and Kenobi only shrugged with a slight wince as he touched his scalp wound. Only a bump on the head. That field surgery must be needed elsewhere." "It is," Mace screamed. We don't have even a preliminary estimate of civilian casualties." He waved off the gunship, and it roared away toward the countless fires that painted red the approach of night. "A shuttle's on its way, Chancellor. We'll have you on the Senate floor within the hour. The HoloNet has already been notified that you will want to make a statement." I will indeed." Palpatine touched Mace on the arm. "You have always been a great value to me, Master Windu. Thank you." "The Jedi are honored to serve the Senate, sir. There might have been the slightest emphasis on the word Senate." Mace remained expressionless as he suddenly moved his arm away from the Chancellor's hand. He looked at Obi-Wan. Is there anything else to report, Master Kenobi?" "What of General Grievous?" "Count Dooku was there." Count Dooku was there," Skywalker interjected. He had a look on his face that Mace couldn't decipher, proud yet weary, even happy. "He's dead now." "Dead?" He looked from Anakin to Obi-Wan and back again. "Is this true? You killed Count Dooku?" "My young friend is too modest. He killed Count Dooku." Smiling, Kenobi touched the lump on his head. "I was taking a nap." "But," Mace blinked, "Dooku was to the Separatists what Palpatine was to the Republic, the center of gravity, binding together a spiral galaxy of special interests. With Dooku gone, the Confederacy of Independent Systems would no longer really be a confederacy at all. They'd fly to pieces within weeks, within days." Mace said again, "But," and he couldn't think of a but. This was all so astonishing that he very nearly, almost, but not quite, cracked a smile. "That is," he said, "the best news I've heard since," he shook his head, "since I can't remember. Anakin, how did you do it?" Inexplicably, young Skywalker looked distinctly uncomfortable. That newly confident presence of his collapsed as suddenly as an overloaded deflector, and instead of meeting Mace's eyes, his gaze flicked to Palpatine. Somehow Mace didn't think this was modesty. He looked at the Chancellor as well, his elation sinking, becoming puzzlement tinged with suspicion. It was entirely extraordinary," Palpatine said blandly, obviously oblivious to Mace's narrowing stare. "I know next to nothing to swordplay, of course. To my amateur's eye, it seemed that Count Dooku may have been a trace overconfident, especially after having disposed of Master Kenobi so neatly." Obi-Wan flushed just a little bit, and Anakin flushed considerably more deeply. Perhaps young Anakin was simply more highly motivated, Palpatine said, turning a fond smile upon him. After all, Dooku was fighting only to slay an enemy. Anakin was fighting to save, if I may presume, the honor of a friend. Mace's scowl darkened. Fine words, perhaps even true words, but he still didn't like them. No one in the Jedi Council had ever been comfortable with Skywalker's close relationship with the Chancellor. They'd had more than one conversation about it with Obi-Wan, while Skywalker had still been his Padawan, and Mace was less than happy to hear Palpatine speaking for a young Jedi who seemed unprepared to speak for himself. He said, I'm sure the council will be very interested in your full report, Anakin. With just enough emphasis on full to get his point across. So with just enough emphasis on full to get his point across, Anakin Skywalker swallowed, and then just as suddenly as it had collapsed, that aura of calm, centered confidence rebuilt itself around him. Yes, of course, Master Windu. Yes, of course, Master Windu. We must report that Grievous escaped, Obi-Wan said. He is as cowardly as ever. Mace accepted this news with a nod. But he's only a military commander. Without Dooku to hold a coalition together, these so-called independent systems will splinter, and they know it. He looked straight into the Supreme Chancellor's eyes. This is our best chance to sue for peace. We can end this war right now. And while Palpatine answered, Mace Windu reached into the Force. To Mace's Force perception, the world crystallized around them, becoming a gem of reality shot through with flaws and fault lines of possibility. This was Mace's particular gift to see how people and situations fit together in the Force, to find the sheer planes that can cause them to break in useful ways, and to intuit what sort of strike would best make the cut. Though he could not consistently determine the significance of the structures, he perceived the darkening cloud upon the Force that had risen with the rebirth of the Sith made that harder and harder with each passing day. The presence of Shatterpoints was always clear. Mace had supported the trainings of Anakin Skywalker, though it ran counter to millennia of Jedi tradition, because from the structure of fault lines in the Force around him, he had been able to intuit the truth of Qui-Gon Jinn's guess, that the young slave boy from Tatooine was in fact the prophesied chosen one, born to bring balance to the Force. He had argued for the elevation of Obi-Wan Kenobi to mastership, and to give the training of the chosen one into the hands of this new, untested master, because his unique perception had shown him powerful lines of destiny that bound their lives together. For good or ill, on the day of Palpatine's election to the chancellorship, he had seen that Palpatine was himself a shatterpoint of unimaginable significance, a man upon whom might depend the fate of the Republic itself. Now he saw the three men together, and the intricate lattice of fault lines and stress fractures that bound them each to the other was so strategically powerful that its structure was beyond calculation. Anakin was somehow a pivot point, the fulcrum of a lever, with Obi-Wan on one side, Palpatine on the other, and the galaxy in the balance. But the dark cloud on the Force prevented his perception from reaching into the future for so much as a hint of where this might lead. The balance was already so delicate that he could not guess the outcome of any given shift. The slightest tip in any direction would generate chaotic oscillation. Anything could happen, anything at all, and the lattice of fault lines that bound all three of them to each other stank of the dark side. He lifted his head and looked to the sky, picking out the dropping star of the Jedi shuttle as it swung toward them through the darkening afternoon. I'm afraid pieces out of the question while Grievous is at large, the Chancellor was saying sadly. Dooku was the only check on Grievous's monstrous lust for slaughter. With Dooku gone, the General has been unleashed to rampage across the galaxy. I'm afraid that far from being over, this war is about to get a very great deal worse. And what of the Sith? Obi-Wan said. Dooku's death should have at least begun the weakening of the darkness, but instead it feels stronger than ever. I fear Master Yoda's intuition is correct, that Dooku was merely the apprentice to the Sith Lord, not the master. Mace started walking toward the small craft dock where the Jedi shuttle would land, and the others fell in with him. The Sith Lord, if one still exists, will reveal himself in time. They always do. He hoped Obi-Wan would take the hint and shut up about it. Mace had no desire to speak openly of the investigation in front of the Supreme Chancellor. The less Palpatine knew, the better. A more interesting puzzle is Grievous, he said. He had you at his mercy, Chancellor, and mercy is not numbered among his virtues. Though we all rejoice that he spared you, I cannot help but wonder why. Palpatine spread his hands. I can only assume the Separatists prefer to have me as a hostage rather than as A martyr. That is of course impossible to say. It may merely have been a whim of the general. He is notoriously erratic. Perhaps the separatist leadership can restrain him in. Perhaps the separatist leadership can restrain him in exchange for certain. Mace let his gaze drift casually to a point somewhere above the Chancellor's head. Considerations. Absolutely not. Palpatine drew himself up, straining his ropes. Negotiated peace would be a recognition of the CIS as the legitimate government of the rebellious systems, tantamount to losing the war. No, Master Windu, this war can end only one way, unconditional surrender, and while Grievous lives, that will never happen. Very well, he said. Then Jedi will make the capture of General Grievous our particular task. He glanced at Anakin and Obi-Wan, then back to Palpatine. He leaned close to the Chancellor, and his voice went low and final, with a buried intensity that hinted just the slightest bit of suspicion and warning. This war has gone on far too long already. We will find him, and this war will end. I have no doubt about it. No doubt of it. Palpatine strolled along, seemingly oblivious. But we should never underestimate the deviousness of the separatist. It is possible that even the war itself had been only one further move, he said with elegant, understated precision, in some greater game. As the Jedi shuttle swung toward the Chancellor's private landing platform at the Senate offices, Obi-Wan watched Anakin pretending not to stare out the window. On the platform was a small, welcome contingent of senators, and Anakin was trying desperately to look as if he wasn't searching that little crowd hungrily for a particular face. That the pretense was a waste of time. Anakin radiated excitement so powerfully in the Force that Obi-Wan could practically hear the thunder of his heartbeat. Obi-Wan gave a silent sigh. He had entirely too good an idea whose face someone Padawan was hoping to see. When the shuttle touched down, Master Windu caught his eye from beyond Anakin's shoulder. The Corn Master made a nearly invisible gesture to which Obi-Wan did not visibly respond. But when Palpatine and Anakin and R2 all debarked toward the crowd of well-wishers, Obi-Wan stayed behind. Anakin stopped on the landing deck, looking back at Obi-Wan. You coming? I haven't the courages for politics, Obi-Wan said, showing his usual trace of a smile. I'll brief the council. Shouldn't I be there too? No need. This isn't the formal report. Besides, Obi-Wan nodded toward the clot of HoloNet crews clogging the pedestrian gangway. Someone has to be the poster boy. Anakin looked pained. Poster man. Quite right, Obi-Wan said with a gentle chuckle. Go meet your public, posterman. Wait a minute, this whole operation was your idea. You planned it. You led the rescue. It's your turn to take the bows. You won't get out of it that easily, my young friend. Without you, I wouldn't have made it to the flagship. You killed Count Dooku and single-handedly rescued the Chancellor. All while I might be forgiven for carrying some old broken-down Jedi Master unconscious on your back. Not to mention making a landing that will be the standard of impossible in every flight manual for the next 1,000 years. Only because of your training, Master. That's just an excuse. You're the hero. Go spend your glorious days surrounded by. Everyone allowed himself a slightly disparaging cough. Politicians. Come on, Master. You owe me, and not just for saving your skin for the 10th time. Ninth time. Cato Nemodia doesn't count. It was your fault in the first place. Obi-Wan waved him off. See you at the other rim briefing in the morning. Well, alright, just this once. Anakin laughed and waved, and then headed briskly off to catch up with the smooth as oiled transparent steel ease of the lifelong politician. The hatch cycled shut, the shuttle lifted off, and Obi-Wan's smile faded as he turned to Mace Windu. You wanted to speak with me. Windu moved close to Obi-Wan's position by the window. It's nodding at the scene on the landing platform. It's Anakin. I don't like his relationship with Palpatine. We've had this conversation before. There's something between them, something new. I could see it in the Force. Mace's voice was flat and grim. It felt powerful and incredibly dangerous. Obi-Wan spread his hands. I trust Anakin with my life. I know you do. I only wish we could trust the Chancellor with Anakin's. Yes, Obi-Wan said, frowning. Palpatine's policies are sometimes questionable, but he dotes on Anakin like a kindly old uncle on his favorite nephew. Mace stared out the window. The Chancellor loves power. If he has any other passion, I have not seen it. Obi-Wan shook his head with a trace of disbelief. I recall that not so long ago you were something of an admirer of his. Things, Mace Windu said grimly, change. Flying over a landscape hogged with smoldering wreckage where once tall buildings filled with living beings had gleamed in the sun, toward a temple filled with memories of so many Jedi who would never return from this war, Obi-Wan could not disagree. After a moment he said, what would you have me do? I'm not certain. You know my power. I cannot always interpret what I've seen. Be alert. Be mindful of Anakin. Be careful of Palpatine. He is not to be trusted, and his influence on Anakin is dangerous. But Anakin is the chosen one. All the more reason to fear an outsider's influence. We have circumstantial evidence that traces Sidious to Palpatine's inner circle. Suddenly Obi-Wan had difficulty breathing. Are you certain? Mace shook his head. Nothing is certain, but this raid, the capture of Palpatine, had to be an inside job, and the timing. We were closing in on him, Master Kenobi. The information you and Anakin discovered, we had traced the Sith Lord to an abandoned factory in the works, not far from when Anakin landed the cruiser. When the attack began, we were tracking him through the down-level tunnels. They stared out the view at a vast residential complex that dominated the skyline to the west. The trail led to the sub-basement of 500 Republica. 500 Republica was the most exclusive address on the planet. Its inhabitants included only the incredibly wealthy or the incredibly powerful, from Wraith, Cinar, of the Cinar system's conglomerate to Palpatine himself. Obi-Wan could only say, "Oh." We have to face the probability that what Dooku told you on Geonosis was actually true, that the Senate is only the influence, that is under the control of Darth Sidious, that it has been for years. Do you? Obi-Wan had to swallow before he could go on. Do you have any suspects? Too many. All we know of Sidious is that he's bipedal of roughly human conformation. Sate passage springs to mind. I couldn't rule out Masameda either. The Sith Lord might even be hiding among the red guards. There's no way to know. Who's handling the questioning? Obi-Wan asked. I'd be happy to sit in. My perceptions are not certified at some, but he shook his head. Interrogate the Supreme Chancellor. Supreme Chancellor's personal aides and advisors. Impossible. But Palpatine will never allow it, though he hasn't said so. Mace stared out the window. I'm not sure he even believes the Sith exist. Obi-Wan blinked, but how can he look at it from his point of view? The only real evidence we have is Dooku's word, and he's dead now. The Sith Lord on Naboo, the Zabrak who killed Qui-Gon. Mace shrugged. Destroyed, as you know. He shook his head. Relations with the Chancellor's office are difficult. I feel he has lost his trust in the Jedi. I have certainly lost my trust in him. But he doesn't have the authority to interfere with the Jedi investigation. Obi-Wan frowned, suddenly uncertain. Does he? The Senate has surrendered so much power, it's hard to say where his authority stops. It's that bad. Mace's jaw locked. The only reason Palpatine's not a suspect is because he already rules the galaxy. But we are closer than we have ever been to rooting out the Sith, Obi-Wan said slowly. That could only be good news. I would think that Anakin's friendship with Palpatine could be of use to us in this. He has a kind of access to Palpatine that other Jedi might only dream of. Their friendship is an asset, not a danger. You can't tell him. I beg your pardon. Of the whole council, only Yoda and myself know how deep this actually goes. And now you know. I have decided to share this with you because you are in the best situation to watch Anakin. Watch him. Nothing more. We Obi-Wan shook his head helplessly. We don't keep secrets from each other. You must keep this one. Mace laced his fingers together and squeezed until his knuckles crackled like blaster fire. Skywalker's arguably the most powerful Jedi alive, and he's still getting stronger, but he's not stable. You know it. We all do. It is why he cannot be given mastership. We must keep him off the council despite his extraordinary gifts, and Jedi prophecy is not absolute. The less he has to do with Palpatine, the better. But surely Obi-Wan stopped himself. He thought of how many times Anakin had violated orders. He thought of how unflinchingly loyal Anakin was to anyone who he considered a friend. He thought of the danger Palpatine faced unknowingly with the Sith Lord among his advisors. Master Windu was right. This was a secret Anakin could not be trusted to keep. What can I tell him? Tell him nothing. I sense the dark side around them both, as it is around us all. Obi-Wan reminded him. The dark side touches all of us, Master Windu, even you. I know that too well, Obi-Wan. For 1 second, Obi-Wan saw something raw and haunted in the Corn Master's eyes. Mace turned away. It is possible that we may have to move against Palpatine. Move against? If he is truly under the control of a Sith Lord, it may be the only way. Obi-Wan's whole body had gone numb. This didn't seem real. It was not possible that he was actually having this conversation. You haven't been here, Obi-Wan. Mace stared bleakly down at his hands. You have been fighting off the war in the Outer Rim. You don't know what it's been like dealing with all the petty squabbles and special interest and greedy, grasping fools in the Senate, and Palpatine's constant, cynical, ruthless maneuvering for power. He carves away chunks of our freedom and bandages the wounds with tiny scraps of security. And for what? Look at this planet, Obi-Wan. We've given up so much freedom. How secure do we look? Owen's heart clenched. This was not the Mace Windu he knew and admired. It was as though the darkness in the Force was so much thicker than on Coruscant than it had breathed poison into Mace's spirit, and perhaps was even breeding suspicion and dissension among the members of the Jedi Council. The greatest danger from the darkness outside came when Jedi fed it with the darkness within. He had feared he might find matters had deteriorated when he returned to Coruscant and the temple. Not even in his darkest dreams had he thought it would get this bad. Master Windu, Mace, we'll go together, he said firmly. And among the three of us, we'll work something out. We will. You'll see. It may be too late already. It may be, and it may not be. We can only do what we can do, Mace. A very, very wise Jedi once said to me, we don't have to win. All we have to do is fight. Some of the lines erased themselves from the current master's face. Then when he met Obi-Wan's eye, there was a quirk at the corner of his mouth that might someday develop into a smile, a tired, sad smile, but a smile. Nonetheless, I seem, he said slowly, to have forgotten that particular Jedi. Thank you for reminding me. It was the least I could do, Obi-Wan said lightly, but a sad weight had gathered on his chest. Things changed indeed. Anakin's heart pounded in his throat, but he kept smiling and nodding and shaking hands and trying to work his way toward a familiar golden-domed protocol droid who hung back beyond the crowds of senators, right arm lifted in a small tentative wave at R2-D2. She wasn't here. Why wasn't she here? Something must have happened. He knew, deep in his guts, that something had happened to her. An accident, or was she sick? Or she'd been caught in one of the vast number of buildings hit by debris from the battle today. She might be trapped somewhere right now. Might be wounded. Might be smothering, calling out his name. Might be feeling the approach of flames. Stop it, he told himself. She's not hurt. If anything had happened to her, he would know. Even from the far side of the Outer Rim, he would know. So why wasn't she here? Had something. He could barely breathe. He couldn't make himself even think it. He couldn't stop himself from thinking it. Had something changed for her in how she felt? He managed to disengage himself from Tundra down Mia's clammy grip and insistent invitations to visit his family's deep-water estate on Mon Calamari. He slid past the mouse-staring Senator Ask with an apologetic shrug. He had a different senator on his mind. R2 was weeping and beeping and whistling intensely when Anakin finally struggled free of the mass of sweaty, grasping politicians. C-3PO had turned away dismissively. It couldn't have been that bad. Don't exaggerate. You hardly even dented. R2's answering Faru sounded a little defensive. C-3PO sent a wisp of static through his vocabulary that sounded distinctly like distinctly like a disapproving sniff. On that point, I agree. You're long overdue for a tune-up, and if I may so, a bath. 3PO. Anakin came up close beside the droid he had built in the back room of his mother's slave hovel on Tatooine. The droid who had been both project and friend through his painful childhood, the droid who now served the woman he loved. 3PO had been with her all these months. He had seen her every day and had touched her. Perhaps even today he could feel echoes of her resonating outward from his electroplated shell, and they left him breathless. "Oh, Master Anakin," 3PO exclaimed, "I am very glad to find you well. Wonders where you went. Friends fall out of touch. Why, I was saying to the Senator just the other day, or was it last week? Time seems to run together so. Do you think you might have the opportunity to adjust my internal calendar settings while you're 3PO? Have you seen her?" Anakin was trying hard not to shout that his voice came out a strangled croak. Where is she? Why isn't she here? Well, certainly, officially, Senator Amidala is extremely busy. C-3PO said imperturbably. She has been sequestered all day in the Naboo embassy, reviewing the new Security Act, preparing for tomorrow's debate. Anakin could breathe. She wasn't here. Hadn't come to meet him over some debate. The Senate. He hated the Senate. He hated everything about it. Red haze gathered inside his head. Those self-righteous, narrow-minded, grubby little squabblers. He'd be doing the galaxy a favor if he were to go over there right now and just wait. He murmured, blinking. Did you say officially? Yes, Master Anakin. 3PO sounded entirely virtuous. That is my official answer to all queries regarding the Senator's whereabouts all afternoon. The red haze evaporated, leaving only sunlight and dizzyingly fresh air. Anakin smiled loudly. And unofficially, the protocol droid leaned close with an exaggeratedly conspiratorial whisper. Unofficially, she's waiting in the hallway. It felt like being struck by lightning, but in a good way, in the best way any man has ever felt since, roughly, the birth of the universe. 3PO gave a slight nod at the other senators and the HoloNet crews on the gangway. She thought it best to avoid a public scene, and she wished for me to relate to you that she believes the both of you might avoid a public scene all afternoon, and perhaps all night as well. 3PO. Anakin blinked at him. He felt an irritational desire to giggle. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm sure I couldn't say, sir. I'm only performing as per the Senator's instructions. You. Anakin shook his head in wonder while his smile grew to a grin. He thought heart split open his cheeks. You are amazing. Thank you, Master Anakin. The credit for that is due largely. C-3PO made an elegantly gracious bow to my creator. Anakin could only go on grinning. With that, Golden Protocol droid laid an affectionate hand on R2's dome. Come along, R2. I have found the most delightful body shop down in the Lepartian Way. They moved away, whirring and clanking after the senators who were already off among the HoloNet crews. Anakin's smile faded as he watched them go. He felt a presence at his shoulder and turned to find Palpatine beside him with a warm smile and a soft word, as he always seemed to be when Anakin was troubled. What is it, Anakin? The Chancellor asked kindly. Something is disturbing you, I can tell. Anakin shrugged and gave his head a dismissive shake. Burst. It's nothing. Anakin. Anything you might that might upset a man, such as yourself, is certainly something. Let me help. There's nothing you could do. It's just, Anakin nodded after R3PO and R2. I was just thinking that even after all I've done, C-3PO is still the only person I know who calls me Master. The Jedi Council. Palpatine slid an arm around Anakin's shoulders and gave him a comradely squeeze. I believe I can be of some use to you in this problem after all. You can? I should be very much surprised if I couldn't. Palpatine's smile was still warm, but his eyes had gone distant. You may have noticed that I have a certain gift, he murmured, for getting my way. And that is the end of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 is titled Padme. and we will read more to this book. I have more books, as you guys can tell. I have the entire original trilogy. I am reading I'm doing this every single day. I will work on my fan fictions, and yeah, if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like. If you enjoyed, comment if you have any other video ideas from me and other books you want me to read for Star Wars and stuff like that. Subscribe if you like my content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.